Hello. Something interesting, it just dawned on me that there are people who are working with the fourth way in different ways, and for most of them it doesn't work. I mean, you could say that of most spirituality, and the reason it doesn't work is because they are the false personality. They are the false self. And they can't see it. And they don't understand it. And so, all their work, which may be strenuous and last for decades, it just doesn't work because the false personality, it's quite difficult to understand. I will explain as I understand it. Okay, well look, when you look at a person, you see their face and their body, right? But actually, if you look deeper, there's a kind of energetic system in there. Over thousands of years, people who are extremely sensitive have turned inside to see underneath the body, underneath the subtle body, to see what's going on inside, and they have seen that there is a kind of a living energy transformation inside, which is why you have energetic maps and diagrams coming from different traditions. One thing that just dawned on me this evening is that because when you speak to people, you're basically speaking to the false personality, to one of the characters, one of the many eyes. It is incredibly important to be able to validate what you're doing energetically. In other words, validate it using the subsystem, because the subsystem is not false. The subsystem is reliable. If you can monitor what's happening energetically inside a person, you don't have to rely on speaking to the false self. And there are other ways, you can intuit from a person whether they are in the right place, if they're coming from in a sincere way. There are other ways. Julius Evola was a very profound man, a very subtle man, a highly cultured man whose intelligence spanned many different realms. He could speak about the physical, about the political, and about the metaphysical, almost seamlessly. He was a very unusual man in that regard, complex and subtle. He could weave together many things. Now he felt, and many felt, that we were a fallen people, and that sometime in history a break had happened, and we had lost our coherence and had become much smaller people. And I think he's right. And the whole situation is concealed by the false self that all human beings seem to be. And the false self acts in such a way that it is very difficult to understand what's going on. And not understanding what's going on, spirituality has been reduced to a kind of lifeboat for people. It is possible to save people, at least until the next life, with spirituality, and many fine, courageous, earnest, devoted people have tried so very hard to do that, and they have achieved their aims. Yet they have not found the real power inside human beings, which, if you could find it, you would become a very powerful being. Having said all that, you've got to recognize that the spiritual path is something extremely profound. It's difficult for people to understand what it is to become light in this world. Anyway, the false self, it seems to work like this. The energy system rises up from below, and human beings have got had a reasonably solid lower story, but a break has happened in the middle story. I don't know how, people explain it differently, and this has begun to fall. And what's happened is that over a long time, thousands of years, things have not just remained there, but the energy has started to leak upwards. It has leaked upwards from the middle story, and it's not in its proper sheath. The middle story is not complete. And so the energy has leaked upwards, and it has started to interact with the face, with the personality, with the mind. And that's why when you speak to a person, they don't want to go back to farming. They don't want to go back to the land, because they're starting to sense some of the functions from the upper story, or from the higher functions. They have a kind of personality. It's a false personality, composed of many fragments. It's a complete mess, as Gurdjieff described. Gurdjieff wanted you to analyze your life step by step to see how fragmented you were, how one of your characters would divorce your wife and all the other ones would have to pay the price. And because everybody around you is fragmented like that, and nobody really understands, they don't feel what it could be to be whole. They drift through their life until they're thrown off the edge of the cliff, and people just disappear. And they cry for 3 days, and then they don't care anymore. And that's what's going to happen to you when you're the one who's falling off the edge of the cliff. Everybody you know will cry for 3 days and remember you once a year, and they get on with their life. Nobody understands anymore. Moreover, being the false self has disturbed this earth and everything around us, and the whole culture that we connect to is based upon the false self. It only has some small traces of the real. It's very difficult. We have to, in the path, we have to disconnect from this culture and try to connect to a higher light, a higher vision of the world, But anyway, this energy has broken free improperly from the middle story, and it's leaked upwards. And there it causes trouble, because it interacts through the world through these fragmented faces. And once it starts to interact through the world, it becomes crystallized. The reason is that when you react with the world, you are digesting impressions. Those experiences that happen to your characters are like a kind of food. They are the third food, the impressions. But because it's not the whole true person there, you're only a fragment. 1 out of 1,000 faces tries to deal with life, and it cannot. And so those characters are easily overwhelmed by the experience, and they cannot digest the food of the impression. The impression happens, but it cannot be digested, and it also cannot be undone. Once the experience has happened, it cannot be undone. So the food, if you like, of the impression gets stuck there, and it becomes a kind of trauma. Trauma is when one of your characters cannot digest the impression, and this holds that face in place. And when people complain about their habits, or their endlessly talking mind, or their traumas, the childhood stuff they cannot forget, and it keeps coming back and back and back, it's because it's undigested and it cannot be digested. Therefore, you become the two-system zoostat, and you're stuck. You cannot undo your face. Even if you want to, you can see it's mad, but you cannot undo it. It's a very serious situation, and not only that, but because the characters carry a touch of the real higher personality, the real true person. When you look at somebody, it's like you can kind of communicate through a dark lens to the real person, through a fragmented mirror. Do you see? It's almost like the real person is looking through you, but through a broken mirror. And the only possibility is to go back down. You must go back down. You must melt the entire false personality down into the middle story and re-regulate the middle story. There is no other possibility. Do you understand? You have to reset the middle story and live from there. And you have to melt the entire false personality down. When normally it's done in stages. You exchange one part of the false for something true. Once you melt it all down, which is a very long and painful and difficult work, then the energy will flow strongly like a torrent through the center of your being. Think about what I've said, because you will realize how painful it is for us to live like this, and how difficult it is to go back down, to melt down each one of those faces one by one. So those people who, like the Ouspensky people who work with a personality, or the many spiritualities, who's there? What they really try to do is they try to reach the true through these faces. It's very difficult, you know. It's very difficult to reach the true light whilst you're encrusted with all these faces. Yet people have such devotion that they do, but most spiritual people, even if they reach the real, they die still encrusted with a false personality. So there you go. A long journey ahead.